Today we are lucky, and I mean very lucky, to have Bob Coates here to give us some fantastic information. Bob is an instructor at West Coast School, an instructor at Texas School. He's been on the speaking circuit out there, I don't know how long. I mean, he's
Gosh, I don't even know either.
He's older than old. He's older than me, so that tells you something. Bob's a super nice guy. He'll answer your questions right and left till he gets bored, then he'll walk away from you. So, no, I'm just kidding. I'm just making that up. I'm going to turn it over to you, Bob, and let you rock and roll with it.
Okay, thank you, Michael, and appreciate you guys putting this together. And what we're talking about today is like blend modes, some art stuff, a lot of selections and selection techniques that may be new to you. Those are some of the things that we'll be playing with. So let's pop open a couple images here. Oh, and by the way, if you take a screenshot of that, or this will be on the video to start with, this is all my contact information and my websites and such. I was going to do one real pretty and I forgot, so I just threw this up real quick this morning. So BC Photography, Bob at bcphotography.com is the email. Successful-photographer.com is for photographers and information like that. I will start posting new again to that. bcphotography.com is my commercial website, and then coatesart.net is my sales place for my artwork. Okay, so just for fun, our local association has been putting on what they call challenges every month. So in this particular case, the challenge is to take textures and put them together. So also for subject matter, I grabbed this real quick. This is just, this was a leaf I pulled out of my garden, and I did a 15 image focus stack so that it with a macro lens to really bring up the details and such. So let's talk real quick about some ideas on how to make selections. This one's fairly easy because it's got a black background, but one of the possibilities would be to grab the quick selection tool and just kind of drag it out and over. And it does a fairly good job. If you have a bigger brush, it will tend to grab more colors quicker. And then when you're making a selection like this, and even if you use, so we go there, we've selected a little bit too much here. So I'm going to hit the Option key. The Option key, if you notice, it turns into a minus sign, and we're going to take away from that selection. And you can see pretty quickly, it did a nice job. We want to get rid of this hole right there, so that stays out there. Now, that's the way I used to do it all the time. I'm going to give you an even quicker way. So that's actually a pretty good selection to start with. Let's put that up on its own layer, Command or Control J, and that's with no manipulation whatsoever. That's a pretty slick selection just using the quick selection tool, which you will find underneath your magic wand tool if you don't see it. So if you look over here in your toolbar, we have that working there. Now, once you have that quick selection tool active, if you look up in the top of, where did it go? Quick select, there we go. Oh, we have a selection in there. So we want to, what's that?
You're not on the bottom layer, I think, is your issue, isn't it?
That's part of it. There we go. Oh, you're right. Very good. Thank you, sir. That's always fun to sit. I always call this the stupid seat because you forget little things as you go along. So I'm going to undo that selection. So when your quick selection tool is there, you have this area up here called Select Subject up in your toolbar options. So if you hit Select Subject, boom, it hit the whole thing right away, right out of the box. And it also gives you, and then of course you would need to do the minus sign to get the hole right there. Let's put that up on its own layer, Command or Control J. And pretty much we've got the same selection with a simple click of Select Subject. Okay, once you have your subject up on its own layer, I have another image that I made for one of my textures. And this was, again, a close-up of a leaf out of the garden. And I use this for the base. So I'm going to take my selected image here, Oh, and if you had like a lot of funky things, like there were a lot of hairs or smaller things to go, you would then take that part of the selection before you put it on its own layer, and then take it up into the select and mask. We'll look at that maybe a little later if we have time. So for right now, I'm just going to. Yep.
I
Question.
have a quick question for you.
Uh-huh.
When you're selecting something like this, do you ever use the expand or contract the selection? You know,
Sure.
one or two pixels.
Sure. Yeah, you can, and a lot of times that's where you would easily find that and be able to see it a little better by using the select and mask.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and do that since we got a question on it now. So we'll go ahead and hit the select subject just so people can see it. So we get the selection going, take it to there. If we go to select and mask, this is a great piece of tool to refine your selection. So you have your ability to feather. And if you're, depending upon where you're putting the image or where it's going to go, right now this is called an onion skin, and the transparency is very low. If we take the onion skin and take it all the way up, you won't see anything at all. If you take it down a little bit, you'll be able to see some of the image in case you needed to kind of decide, well, did I get everything I needed or whatever? So it gives you a chance to see what's going on. Depending upon what you're going to put your image on, you have different views that you can dial in. So let's say this was going to be on a really dark area. We could put it on a black background and you could see, put the opacity all the way up, we could see that, oh yeah, everything looks pretty good. Oh, we got a little problem right down here because this will show up on black, but it wouldn't necessarily show up on a lighter background. So right in here, we could go ahead and use just this little tool right there, make our brush a little bit bigger. So it's the second tool down. The top tool here in the Refine Edge dialog box is the exact tool that we were just using before, which is the quick selection tool. The next one down is to add and kind of refine your selection. So you can kind of just go down here, and if we touch that, then it looks at the whole thing and watch. Did you see the gray just disappear? We'll do it right here too. And you'll just watch, that just takes it right away. So that's where you could get in and fix up hair and things like that. The other areas that you want to look at is radius, smart radius, and decide whether you're going to use those or not. And the best way to test these tools is to just bang them to the wall. What happens when you really just push them to the wall? You get a chance to see what goes on with your pieces. Smoothing, sometimes when you use the quick selection tool, this will be a pretty rough selection. You notice we already have 3 pixels smoothed on that. And if we take it away, you see it's not quite so smooth. The edges are just, not quite there. So we can go ahead and smooth it out just that little bit. Feather is for moving your images in and out. And then don't forget, we're on the overlay mode right now. So we can go back to on black. So you can choose that. I hit the V key, which made it overlay. I don't know why that worked that way. When you feather, remember that when it says 2.3, this is image resolution dependent. So if the image is really super high res, a 1 pixel feather may not be enough. It may need more. So in this case, I'm using 2.3, but here's what a feather does. It does that number there of pixels is actually on either side. So if you say 2.5 pixels as your feather, it's actually 5 because it's going 2.5 inside and 2.5 outside, just so you're aware. But if we really pull it up really big there, look what happened with our feather. We've feathered it out, but now we don't have our subject anymore. We've kind of lost it. That's at 1,000 pixels. If we bring it down, so you can see your feather goes inside and outside. See how it's dark underneath here, and then it's light on the outside. So what we're looking to do with a feather is to just ease in there so that the edge is a little bit rounded. Many times when people are doing selections and trying to do composites, they forget this part, and that's part of what makes it look cut out if you just drop it in there, in addition to the possibility of the lighting not being good or whatever. Contrast will allow you to snap it up a little bit, and you can decide, how you want to do there. And then here's that shift edge that we were just talking about, and here it's in percentages. So in this particular case, we've shifted the edge by 1% down, but watch what happens when we go further. It gets smaller and smaller, and now it looks even crunchier. If we take it really big, now it's outside there. It doesn't seem to be moving very much. Don't know why that's happening, but anyway, just a little tiny shift edge is usually enough to make a difference there. And then your output, you have a lot of different possibilities. You can do it as a layer mask. You can do it as a selection, but we were already at a selection. Why would you want that? Personally, the way I do mine is a new layer with the layer mask. So when you hit OK and bring it out, if you look right here, the mask is already built and it's on there. And in case you need to make some adjustments, like down here, I'm looking, I'm going, ooh, I don't particularly care for this little dark spot right there. I can go to my mask, I can go to my brush and make it a little bit bigger. Ooh, that's a nasty brush. Let's go get a regular soft round brush. And we're going to just take that edge away. And so you can refine your selection after the fact, and it's always laying there as a mask. That also makes it possible for you to quickly change this and command or control click on the mask itself, and that activates the selection. Another thing to do when you're working with selections and cutouts and things is once you have a selection made that you really are that was either very difficult to do or you really want to work with on a regular basis, you can go here to a thing called Save Selection under the Select menu. Then we can name that. I'm just going to call this Leaf just for fun and say, okay. So what did that do? Well, are you familiar with channels? So nod your heads if you are familiar with channels and nod your head if you're not. Okay. So if you look in here, down here in channels, these are pictures of any selections that you have made. This is the one I just saved. So it's right here and available to go back to at any time. So I can reactivate that from another place. Let's say I threw my mask away and forgot and was like, oh, that's right, I still have my leaf selection in there. And if we were going to go do that, the way to do that would be to, excuse me, go back to your layers palette, turn that off. We'll go back to our original image, deselect, and now we can say, all right, so where is, let's see, select, filter, select. Oh, look, it has a load selection. Then we can go in and pick the leaf and say, okay, and now our leaf is reselected for a lot of different reasons. Later on, you might want to do that. All right, so good enough on those right there for that idea?
Great.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is let's go ahead, when you want to put an image onto a different place, you highlight your layer, hold down your Command or Control key, and then click on your subject, and we can drag it over on top of the other image, move it to the center, or somewhere in there. If you want it to be exactly in the center, hold down the Shift key before you let go, and boom, our image is now in on top of our other one. So in order to make that stand out a little bit, I'm going to add a layer effects of a drop shadow. And when I have my drop shadow, you can move your drop shadow around in the layer effects just by clicking and dragging in there, so you can set it right where you like, or you can choose to use the controls here in the dialog box. So we can change the size. If the size is really tight, it starts to get to be a really hard edge. If there's no size at all, look at, there's no edge at all. Basically, this is feathering your selection of your drop shadow. The distance is how far away it's going to be. This is a pretty amazing little tool. And then we can change the opacity and make it really dark and really light. The nice part about these tools is you're able to match your shadows to your lighting patterns that are in the image that you're putting things into, especially if you're doing compositing. We're not going to get crazy about compositing today, but just wanted to kind of keep that in your mind that your shadows want to be the same. That's another thing that would make something seem like it doesn't live there. So let's say okay to that. And we've got our effect. So that's a little bit big there. And what I'm going to do is a little design with what they call step and repeat. Command or Control T. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. And these days, Photoshop switched. If you're in the newest version of Photoshop, it automatically, if you leave it at the current settings, will allow your image to be in proportion as you make the changes. If you hold down the Shift key, now you can get crazy and do all sorts of weird things like that. So and also the one other thing is if you hold down the Option key, it will go to the center and out from in and out. So these are kind of nice little tools to be able to control your transformation a lot easier.
Bob, could you repeat those again, please?
Sure. When you activate your transform tool, if you at the moment in the latest in Photoshop before, you used to have to hold down the Shift key in order to keep the proportions proper. Nowadays, no matter what, it automatically says, hey, you probably want to keep these the same. You don't want to make this girl fat or this guy fat, or this person really thin or whatever. Right now, I'm holding down the Shift key, and now the proportions are not being activated. If I let go of the Shift key, now it stays that way. If you hold down the Option or Alt key, it will come from the center point and out. Does that work?
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. So when you're ready to accept your transformation, you hit the Return key, and then just go ahead and now I'm going to place this, somewhere near the center. And what I'm going to do is something a little bit fun. So I'm going to make I'm going to make a copy of this layer by hitting Command or Control on a PC J. We now have a copy. If you look on your layers palette, you can see there's a second one there. Now I'm going to go ahead and transform that again, Command or Control T. And right now, if I was to move this, it pivots around that center point. I'm going to hit Command Z. Anytime you do anything, Command or Control Z will undo it. So if I made a little boo-boo and I was like, I want to start fresh again, Command or Control Z will take you back to the last spot that you were just in the transform tool without having to redo it. So what we're going to do is take this pivot point, and I'm going to click on it and drag it over. I'm going to put it right on the end of the leaf right there. Now when I pivot, it goes around that spot. So that's kind of cool. Now I would like to make a certain number of these to go around and make a complete circle so that I end up with an even number of things. And what you do is you use math. There are 360 degrees in a circle. If we go here and put, let's say 36, then I'm going to get 10 to make a perfect circle. So I'm going to go ahead and accept that transformation. And I just hit the return and nothing happened. Okay, so just so you know, it was on this little angle thing up here in your options for your transform tools is how I set that degrees. So it's now 36 degrees. Now I hit the return key, but I didn't come in. What it did is it just took the cursor out of that dialog box. Now when I hit it one more time, now I hit return or enter again, and it's accepted the transformation. Now, the beauty is there's a thing called the claw or the method or whatever. You mash a whole bunch of keys down in your corner. So Shift, Option, Command, or Shift, Alt, Control. And now every time I hit the T key, everything that was done before is repeated. So that's a pretty cool little tool. Let's go one more time. Command, Option, T. There we go. There's perfect 10, and they line up exactly right because I put the proper number up into the dialog box.
Could you go through that process where you automated the copying?
where I made this all happen in one shot. Yeah, the keystroke, once you've done it once, you've got your image there, you're going to do whatever you're going to do the first time. Once you've done it the first time, you're going to hold down the shift. On the Mac, it's Shift Option Command. On the PC, it's Shift Alt Control, and then you just keep those pressed down and then strike the T key. And every time you hit the T key, it will keep going.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, that's actually a pretty fun one. We used to have to work really hard to make that happen. In the new Photoshop, if you continually hit the Z control and then the Z key, you can back things up one step at a time. Used to be you had to do some more work to it. I think it's kind of nice to be able to, and then if you want to have it back, you Shift Control Z will go in the opposite direction. So that's kind of a nice little set of shortcuts.
Excuse me, how did you get it to 36 degrees?
Okay, let's go back up into, let's call the transform tool. When you have the transform tool active, if you look up at the dialog box at the very top, your options, go across the top, and it's right after your height. There's a little angle right here. You see my cursor?
Yeah.
Okay, so you just dial that number in there, whatever it may be. If you want to have it make 36 copies to make the perfect circle, you would put 18 degrees in. And then that would be a perfect circle after you did it 36 times.
And we call you to do the math for us?
it took me a while to figure this stuff out. I'll tell you.
How can you have 36 into 18 into 360 degrees? It's 10 degrees.
It gives you 20. You can put whatever you want. So it's multiply. If you divide 360 by 18, it'll be 20, I believe. And I'm not a math major, so you could try it, and if it didn't work, no.
Okay.
So 10 will for sure give you 36. 20 will give you 18. Right? Does that sound right? Okay. Well, anyway, put them in and just, actually use a calculator rather than your head. I'm just working with some numbers that I already knew.
And Bob, you said that's the transform tool?
We are in the transform tool, and then your options bar is at the very top once you've activated it. Command or Control T.
Bob,
Yes.
This is Suzanne. Can you show where the pivot point thing was again? I know that's way at the beginning, but
no problem. I'll just bring it up right here. It's right at the moment. It always pops up in the center of your image.
Oh, okay.
When you click on it, you can put it anywhere you want. You can put it all the way out there, and it will pivot around that out there.
Ah, okay, great.
Ooh,
And if your pivot point is not highlighted, there's a checkbox in the upper left-hand corner of your toolbar, way up on the top toolbar.
Correct. Yeah, and again, you always look for your options. That'll help you out. Okay, so once we have our shape done, let's say we're happy with that shape. I'm going to start at the top, and I'm going to hold down my Shift key and click on the bottom layer. And now I've selected all those layers at once. And again, we're going to use that same mash the corner, is what I call it, Shift, Option, Command, and then the letter E. And what that will do is make a mistake, because I didn't, okay, so if you look over here on the layers palette, you'll see we've got everything that we've shown there is been put onto a single layer. I don't want to do quite that. I want all of those individual pieces, but I don't want to show the background. So what I want to do is isolate all these guys together. Hold down the Shift key now that I've selected them all. Make sure that you're highlighted on the top layer there. Shift, Option, Command, E for merge. And now look, all of those have ended up on this one single layer, and I could go here and lower the overhead on my Photoshop, and now I have my shape. Whoops. Yeah, I know. Stop that. I have my shape all as one layer. So now I don't have to have all those masks and things. You don't necessarily want to do this right away because you could do that and then go, help me, help me. So anyway, now that I have my shape, I'm going to fire up my background. And then we can, let's see, let's make that stand out a little bit more. So I'm going to add a curves layer and then just lower or darken it down a little bit. Okay, if you're not familiar with the curves layer, the top right is your highlights and the bottom left is your shadows. This is your 3/4 tones. And then this is your half tones. If you've put a point on your curves layer, you can do a couple things. You say, oh no, I don't know. I want to start over because you know what? I got all funky and things just got weird. You can hit this little reset button right there. Or if it's a single point, you can just take it and drag it off. That's kind of nice. So the nice part about curves versus using, say, levels is that you have a lot more control because we can control our shadows and then we can add a little contrast to it, which you could still do in say, in levels. But here I can now say, oh, I want to control the midtones as well. I can lock down this area right here because every time you put a point on there, it makes it so it can't move. Now I can do just the dark tones and the light tones aren't being really changed. So if you haven't already mastered curves or felt that it was too complicated, go in and play. It's one of those ones that's really worth learning. All right, so let's reset that. Let's just bump this down a little bit so our subject matter comes to life there. So let's say I want to do a little something to this layer, but I don't want to have it happen there. So if I was to do an adjustment layer, let's say use saturation, and I wanted to saturate the heck out of it, but I don't want to saturate the background. I just want to saturate this subject right here. So what we can do is, when you would first launch that, if you hold down the option, well, let's go ahead and do it. We can hold down the option key or the alt key on the PC and bring up that use saturation. And it says, look, you can use the previous layer to create a clipping mask. And you say, okay to that. Check that box, say okay. And now if you notice that this use saturation layer has this little arrow. So that means it lives with this right here and it will only change what's on that layer. So you've clipped that information to whatever's here. And so it doesn't affect what's down below that. And let's say you didn't want, let's say, oh, you know what? I want that saturation everywhere. You can hold down the option key. And when you get to the in between the two, if you click on it, you can undo it so that it's not clipped anymore. And now it's affecting everything that's underneath it rather than just this layer. So that's a pretty handy little thing to have. Last but not least with this, let's see, nope, I don't have a subject, but what I'll do is I'll show you what the finished piece was for this. I'll say open, baby, I say open. There it goes. So there was what I ended up with after playing with that. So you're shadowing. So basically what I did was I took that first original shape and then I replicated that. And if you look right here, let's see, if you hold down the option key and want to see what's just on one layer and nothing else, it will turn off everything else in the neighborhood except for that. And when you click on it, it'll turn it back on. So now we're looking at that one. So that's a nice way to be able to see what's on an individual layer. Option eyeball will turn off everything else and then it'll return it to where it was before you started there. So, and then that was this was just a floor tile that was in my bathroom that I made a photograph of. And then if you notice, I have a mask on this up here so that it's not necessarily, I have a curve that's on here that's only affecting, that's another way to isolate and have something only happen to the layer that you're working on. So that was just some fun stuff for our state. I'm getting ready to put that in and show them what's going on. So I'm going to move on to a next idea here. Don't save, don't save. Let's go over here. How about single in? Okay, so let's take a look at a single image HDR. Let's see if I can show you what that looks like right now. Okay, so if we look here, hey, come back. If we look here, we have, you know, this image here. And I took that and I made is this the one? Nope, it was this one here. Okay, so here's the image here. Make this a little smaller so we can make this a little bigger. And the reason I'm kind of working this way is I found that Zoom will chew up and use up so much stuff that if I have Bridge open, it will crash Bridge and choke. So hopefully by doing it this way, we're going to be in a good shape. So go back in here. Where are you?
I thought I was the only one having problems with Bridge doing that.
No, it has to do with Zoom, and I've had a problem with that from the get-go. It's been very interesting. Let me tell you very much. Okay, so if you look at not that one, that one. Okay, if you look at this image here, most of us would say, wow, that's pretty far underexposed. And I would, you know, for the longest time, I was working multiple exposures. And what I found out, excuse me, is that if you expose to the right, when you try and do an HDR, like obviously this scene has a really high dynamic range. We've got, you know, if you're in the middle and you've got really good detail here, the sky's too light. And if you're here and your sky's right, this is blocked up and too much of a mess. So I used to make multiple exposures and then use the HDR feature to do that. But nowadays, so I would take this image and we're going to go into, where are you? Aurora HDR. I've already preloaded this one. Oh, apparently I didn't. Let's go back one. We'll drag this into Aurora HDR. And instead of taking all 3 or 4 of those images and making an HDR, I'm going to do this with a single image. So the first thing I'm going to do with Aurora is go in here. It's already got color denoise activated, and that will help with the fringing that can happen around your subject, against, you know, light against dark in the skies. I'm also going to hit the chromatic aberration reduction. Takes a little bit longer to process the image, but that's okay. So we're now here and I'm creating an HDR from this single image. Now remember what it looked like. And give it just a second because it's detecting the scene type. And it's detecting the scene range, improving the colors, final touches to make it awesome. I love Skyloom. They get a little bit fun with their with their images. And look at that, straight out of the box. Look at how much detail we have without blocking up shadows and how much it's brought down the sky. And that's just straight letting it do a tone map from that single image. Now, after that, we now have complete control. So I think those shadows are still a little tight, so I can pop up the shadows just a little bit. I can bring down the highlights if I want. So it gives us a thing. And then, so I'm pretty happy with that as a rendered image from a single thing. Another tool that I really like is this Image Radiance, which gives us just a little bit of je ne sais quoi. It kind of softens the edges. It adds some feathering to the shadows and such. And then I would take this out. Now I don't want to spend time because you have to export this into a folder. I'm pretty sure I have another copy of it here somewhere. There it is.
Hey, Bob, that
Yes.
je ne sais quoi, is that kind of like denoise?
No, it's not. The Image Radiance, it's kind of like an Orton effect. if you're familiar with that, it's a glow and a thing, but it only does it to certain areas and it brings it out. So let's go take a look at that image right there. So you see how it's got just that little soft edge that it's just kind of, I don't know, it's just something that's, I call it nummy. It's kind of worked out pretty good there. But look at how clean, because we're working with the same image, there is no offset of any images. It's just really clean. It's really neat. It's quite beautiful. So I'm real happy with that single image HDR, but I'm doing it with what I would normally consider an overexposed image. And what I'm finding is that, excuse me, what I'm finding is that the brain dead. What was I talking about?
Je ne sais quoi.
No, we were talking about the highlights and shadows. Okay, so in your files, most of your noise is down in the lower side of your file. So if you take an underexposed image, or even an image that's technically exposed properly, and try and boost the highlights, you're going to pull more noise into your image. If you go to the best information is up in that top 3/4 tones of your image. The worst information is down at the bottom 3/4 tones. So you don't want to lift those up. You'd rather push the others down. So long as you don't blow out your exposures on more than one channel, it's great to keep pushing it to further and further to the right and then clean it up and post. I'm almost not even shooting the HDRs anymore. I'm just going ahead and watching my histogram on the camera to make that happen.
Was that the raw file that you dragged in there, or was that a JPEG?
That was a raw file.
Thank you.
Can you show us
absolutely.
the histogram on the base file that you used? In Photoshop or?
Yeah, let me see if I can get it.
Raw editor.
Oh yeah, here we go. So here it is over here. Look at all that. Everything is all up there. There's hardly anything down here in this bottom area. And it's actually showing that, ooh, you know, you might have clipped something just a little bit. And I don't care because it came back.
So you're about a stop overexposed.
Probably stop and a half at least.
Okay. All right.
Sometimes, and depending upon the scene, sometimes I'll go a good 2 stops over to make sure that I have enough going on there. But it's pretty amazing how this works.
Bob, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
What would be the result like if you would have used about stop and a half underexposed frame?
It's nasty. It's nasty because as you try and bring up the detail out of these areas, yeah. I mean, you can make it happen. It'll show. But I can guarantee you, and I always recommend, don't believe anything I say. Go test for yourself. Take a scene and just, you know, really do a 7-stop, you know, bracket and do the highest one and the lowest one and compare them together. And you'll see the difference, that there's so much more crunch and grunge and noise when you try and pull something up out of the shadow areas.
All right, thank you.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, so back into Photoshop. Let's so you get the idea on that. I like that stuff a lot. Let's go look at this here.
Do you think you could come close in camera raw to that image?
Yes. Yeah, you can, but what I've found is I have more control, and I have that Image Radiance tool and a few other tools that are in Aurora HDR 2019 works pretty well. If anybody's interested in that, I have coupon codes I can send you. Just send me an email to bob@bcphotography.com, and whatever the deal of the day is, it'll save an additional $10 unless it's some unbelievable deal. Where did my file go? Oh, I moved it over here, didn't I? Come on back out. PPC, there we go. Okay, so let's go to, are we doing good so far?
Fantastic.
All right. So we're gonna break this guy out. So here was another one that I would, yeah, I would take that in there. I would take that, let's see, where did it go? Okay, I would take this image, same thing. I would go into Aurora HDR. Don't save that one. So you can see this one has even a higher density range to work with. And I should have saved out another file there, but that's the way it goes sometimes.
That wouldn't work the same if you used the plug-in for Photoshop versus straight into HDR.
No, it would. You would get access to these tools if you used it as a plug-in. So yeah, you could do it in Adobe Camera Raw, and then do the come back over here as a you're right and whenever you do that, you'll want to make a next layer, because then you would have all that information on a second layer, and you'd still have your base stuff, so you could add a mask or whatever and change it up.
Okay.
So right here, this one here, it really came down, but look, watch what happens when we open the shadows back up. Bring the highlights down, little temperature, little radiance. Where's my exposure? Bring it up. Okay. So I thought I had saved out an image of this before, but apparently it's not in this little pile here, or is it? Oh, yes, it is. Okay, so I'm gonna skip out of here. Don't save. No, thank you. There we go. So let's open up something like this. We were talking about selections, and one of the things I definitely wanted to show you was two things. One is color range, and that's under the select menu, color range. Let's say we want to replace this sky because it's pretty blah. So in this particular case, what we can do is just click on the sky, and that begins your process. Now, if you add this little plus key here, we can say, yeah, I want that, plus that, plus that, plus that, and you can kind of watch your little preview right here. And then you can dial in the fuzziness to make it grab the selection that you want. And once you've done that, you say, okay. And now we have a complete selection there, and we can add a mask to it. Ooh, that's not what I wanted. I wanted it the other way around. So all I have to do is, since I'm inside the mask, hit Command or Control I, and we're inverting the mask, and now we've taken the sky out. Now we can add another sky in quite easily. Open this guy. This one's got a little bit more interest. Again, I'm just going to hold down the Command or Control key, click on the image, and then drag it over top. And don't just stay up there, but you need to move your cursor over your image. And then if you hold down the Shift key, it'll constrain it to the middle. And then we're going to drag it underneath. And now we have a new sky underneath. And then we can, again, transform it and bring it up and kind of work it out. So that's kind of a pretty cool. We'll escape that. Now, another way to get to that same idea, I'm gonna get rid of this mask. And I actually am looking for, let's see, do I have it? Yeah, let's open this one back up. So if I wanted to replace this sky, this would be really hard to select in between all these bits and pieces. It would just make you crazy. So I'm going to unlock it, and I'm going to go down here to the FX, or the blending effects. There's a thing called blending options. Blending options, oh, you know what? Before you do the blending options, go to your channels first and just take a look at your pieces. So what you're looking for is which channel has the most contrast. So we have, it's really bright up here, it's really dark down there in the blue channel. less in the green channel. These are closer, and this is even closer. So obviously the blue channel has the most contrast. You just want to keep that in mind. So we go back to the RGB, go back to our layers, go to blending options. And on the effects, on the special effects menu, I think most people don't see this one. And what you want to do is the actual blending options is not all this stuff down here. The blending options is these over here. So remember we said the blue, if we were to take the blue, we can pick which channel we want to work from, and we're going to pick the blue channel because that had the most contrast. What we're trying to do is select this blue out, or just to show you what will happen if I take out the stuff from the dark. And remember, Photoshop gives you pictures of what's going to happen. So it's working with the dark and going lighter with this slider. And look, everything that's underneath is just all disappearing. That's not what we want. We want to go from the highlight side and we want to bring it down. And man, this just is freaky. The first time I saw this, I almost cried thinking about the number of times that I was trying to make selections to work to get to get in there and paint around leaves and things like that. So once we do that, look at that. It just took all that stuff out there, but it's a little bit raggedy. So the selection is not exactly perfect. So what we can do is hold down the Option or Alt key, and you see this little triangle here that we were using. It will split if you hold down the Alt or Option key. Hello, do it. Grab half of it, and now what it'll do is everything from here up is gone, and then here down it's being feathered. So it makes a really nice thing. So we'll go down just a little bit more with this guy. We can feather this one just a little bit. And look, and just using the blues, we've made it happen. We can do this with the gray channel as well. We can take the gray channel and play with that. So play with these things, but in the blue channel. Now, one thing that happened because images tend to have more color in them than you think. Look at this area down here. So we're going to say okay to this. But this area down here has holes in it because it had some of the blues from the blue channel. So in this particular case, we have a bit of a problem because we want to put a sky underneath there, but we won't want the sky coming through here. We want this information back. Well, the way to do that is to Command or Control J. We're making another copy. Hold down your Control key and go here and say, convert this to a smart object. So we're converting this to a smart object. And what we're going to do is we're going to make this into a layer mask, because now, look, it's got the cleared information is up in here. So what we can do is Command or Control, click on the thumbnail, and that creates your selection. That wouldn't happen if you were using it on this layer here. It just wouldn't work. So we're up here, and now we can say, yep, make it a layer mask. And now look, there's our mask almost made. Since we didn't go all the way down in the blues, we've got to make a couple small adjustments to it. But let's get up here, make our brush a little bit bigger, hit the 0, make sure it's black. And now 100%, please. Thank you. Turn that off. There we go. We can check there. And now we can undo and paint with white. Oh, we're still in the smart selection mode. So what we need to do is take this little bad boy and drag it down below. Then we can throw the smart object away. And now we can paint on our proper layer, get on your proper thing, get on the layer itself. There we go. Oh, we cleared the information. Dumb. Anyway, I forgot a piece right there. But you get the idea that you're able to use that blend if selection to make some changes, and then we could take our cloud, stick it right underneath there. Yeah, we know you're different, just like me. Command or Control T. And you get the idea. So we'll escape. Okay. Is there anything, since we're coming up on time, are there any questions or want some clarifications on some things that we already talked about, or do you want to go on to the next thing?
I'm gonna put that on.
Keep on moving on.
Keep on moving on. All right, what have we got?
And just a reminder, everybody, this is being recorded. It'll be on Bob's YouTube channel, hopefully by tomorrow or so.
Okay, so yeah, let's do this.
Can I ask a question before you go on?
Yeah, absolutely.
When you made that blended blue thing that you did, couldn't you put that in as a layer mask rather than going through that process you did of adding the mask layer later?
Only if you were able to select it a different way. The blend if is actually taking the information from the channels palette and allowing it to go around all the things. That probably wasn't the perfect image to use to show you how great it worked. I had another image, but it didn't make it into this folder. But the idea is using that blend if it makes selections that you cannot make by hand. So if you don't have a selection, you can't make a mask.
Yeah, well, I love the example that you use, because sometimes I'm working with trying to get the background out of the trees, and so I could see myself doing that. That was really great.
Yeah, it's a pretty awesome little tool for sure.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Oh, sure, absolutely. Okay, let's build since we're doing clouds and playing with those, let's make a cloud brush. Anybody make brushes? It's kind of neat. So a lot of times putting things together will make this the last little guy here. So I like these two clouds right here. If you were really doing it right, you'd probably say, you know what, let me do this cloud and this cloud, but I'm not doing both together just for because I can. So I'm going to go ahead and crop in on this image. And so this is an idea for you to go out there and make sure that if you see clouds in the sky and it's looking good, go ahead and grab them so that you have them in your files. I have like probably hundreds, maybe thousands of different types of clouds and cloud files. I used them a lot in my real estate stuff, and now I'm using them in my art. In this particular case, what we're going to do is go ahead and crop down, and we're going to turn this into a brush. So the first thing we want to do is just hit Command or Control M. Now, normally I would use an adjustment layer, but what I want is I'm trying to make this contrasty. So again, with the curves, Command or Control M is for curves. I don't know why, but that's the shortcut for, you would also find it, let me show you up here. You would also find it up here under Image, Adjustments, Curves, where are you? And it said Command M. Are you aware that your shortcuts are always listed right here? If you want to get faster in Photoshop, learn to use your left hand or your right hand if you're the other way around. But look up here, and if you say, "Oh gosh, I didn't know that Command M was the shortcut for just adding a curves adjustment." So if you got up there and you were like, you want to learn how to do it, don't click on it now, just go away and then use the shortcut, because then you're starting to get muscle memory too. So you will learn much, much faster. Okay, so we've got our curves layer. And if you look here, look at all this information here. I want to take this and I want the contrast to get way up there. So I'm really just dragging in on that corner there. If this side over here had some space, I would go ahead and drag it over too and really, get a good contrast going. So I've just applied that, and I can't get back to it. It lives with the file. That's fine. Next, what we want to do is turn it to black and white. There's a couple ways to do that. Shift Command or Control U will just desaturate it. Or what I found is a nice little idea is the black and white adjustment layer, because at this point I can add even more contrast by going in and saying, ooh, I want those blues to go down. So what we're trying to do is make a black and white, really, really solid image. So I can take that down. I can take my cyans. There we go. Look at that. I'm basically getting rid of that background. So again, the blacker and whiter we can get. Then I'm going to merge that down. Then I'm going to come up here and I'm with my brush tool. So what I'm doing is I'm cleaning up this selection here. So painting, and always if you're working with things like this and you want for sure to be black and white, you want to hit the D key for default. That will make sure that your black and white, your background and foreground colors are full black and full white. Because sometimes you could look over there and say, oh yeah, that's black. And if it was only 90% black, you're actually painting with gray. Just always hit the D key before you start there. So now I'm just going to clean up these edges a little bit, just make sure this is just as black as possible. I'm getting rid of anything I don't want to get. And just for fun, I'm going to run through here just a touch, get those little boogers off of there. Maybe that's a real telltale kind of guy. So I'm shaping my clouds how I want them. This would be a telltale one, because remember, if you use this as a brush, you'll see it in a lot of places. So you don't want to have telltale type things. So I'm getting rid of a few of those. So let's say, okay, I'm happy with my selection. Now all we need to do is invert this selection. And we can look once more. Is there anything in there that's, not either gray or white, especially on the areas around the outside? We say, oh, it looks okay. Then you go to Edit. And under Edit, go down to Define Brush Preset. And it'll give you the name of the file that you're working on. What you want to do is name your brushes really specific. So I'm going to say Cloud Pair, and it will tell you the size of this window. So it's 2025 pixels. So I'm going to say it's my cloud that I'm building. So I'm going to put my initials in there in case it goes someplace else. And then I'm going to put the 2025 P as in pixels, so I know how big the brush is. You don't want to do these with really small. If it's only 400 pixels, you're not going to be able to use it and make it bigger later. So once we say okay, immediately that brush appears at the bottom of your brushes palette. So down here at the very bottom of your brushes palette, there it is, my cloud pair. I'm selecting that, and now let's go ahead and make a new image. Let's make it black just for ease and say, okay, I want some clouds, right? Oh, it's not working. You can't paint black on black and expect to see white clouds. Hit the X key and try again. And there we've created that, and that's replicable all the time. So let's go over to our image that has that needs some clouds. And now again, use just the same way your brush works, just the way. So lowering the get onto a layer, and I always put these on their own separate layer, and go ahead and paint there. And the reason I put them on their own separate layer is I can move them around even after they're done, or I can transform them, Woo! Okay, so you get the idea that you're able to add clouds wherever you want. So that's pretty cool. You can build a whole library of your own clouds to be able to drop into images. And that's a great tool and a great way to play. That makes sense? Any questions on that?
Fantastic.
Okay. So if you guys don't have any questions, I think that's about an hour. So that's probably,
Right.
our good stuff there.
That's fantastic, Bob. Thank you very much for sharing. That's amazing stuff.
Oh, you're very welcome. And again, for anybody who needs the contact information, it's all right there. Does this make anybody else crazy as me? This not being not being centered. I'm sitting there going, help me. Move over, kids. There we go. All right, now, okay, don't look at the one on the front of this. Look at this one here instead. Now I feel better. See, when you rush and do them just before you start. Okay. Again, last chance. Any questions on stuff that
A lot of thank yous in the chat room.
Yeah.
And do you know how they can find your YouTube channel on YouTube? Can they just type in Bob Coates, or is it something special?
That's how I find myself.
And it's COATES.
That's correct. That's
so it's
correct.
got an E in there.
If you look in there, yeah, COATES, and yeah, it's just Bob Coates.
We'll be posting the link to the YouTube video shortly, since we get it up there for you.
Okay, yeah. As soon as you get it to me, I will get it uploaded and send you a link for that. And actually, I'll be sending you a link, so it'll be real easy to find.
Way cool. Thank you. That was great.
All right.
Thank you.
Good to see all you guys. Look forward to seeing some of you. Hey, Mr. Tom, how you doing there, buddy? Look forward to seeing you guys in West Coast School or Texas School, should that happen soon, whichever way it happens.
Yeah, hopefully you'll have Texas School shortly. We'll see. We can only cross our fingers. Well, thank you, everybody. Next Tuesday, we don't have a plan yet, but we'll have a plan and post it for you shortly and let you know what's going on. So
you could probably stop recording.
I'm going to stop recording right now.